The fire becomes a mistress, a lover. John Leonard Orr, 1984 to 81. In context, location, Southern California. Theme, serial arson. Before, 1979 to 80. Bruce Lee-born Peter Dinsdale committed 11 acts of arson in and around his hometown of Hull, Yorkshire, UK. After, 1985 to 2005, Thomas Sweat, a prolific American arsonist, set close to 400 fires, the majority of which were in the Washington, D.C. area. 92 to 93, Paul Kenneth Keller, a serial arsonist from Washington State, set 76 fires in and around Seattle during a 6-month spree. With its arid climate and expanses of wilderness, California is a magnet for fire starters, but none of them have come close to the level of fiery devastation wrought upon people and property by John Leonard Orr. In the early 80s, a series of blazes began in the Los Angeles area, sometimes as many as 3 a day. In one incident, 65 homes were reduced to smoldering ash, but it was not until October 10, 1984, that human lives were extinguished by the flames. At 7 p.m., the public address system at Olds Home Center in South Pasadena blared an emergency warning. Noticing smoke pouring out of the hardware department, cashier Jim Obdun rushed to help customers flee the store and was badly burned in the process. Fortunately, though, he lived to tell the tale. Co-workers Jimmy Satina and Carolyn Krause were not so lucky. Nor were customers Ada Deal and Matthew Chortle, a loving grandmother and her 2-year-old grandson. The following morning, arson investigators searched the blackened ruins for the point of origin, where a fire first begins to determine its cause. Unable to locate it, they concluded that it was an electrical accident. But one seasoned arson investigator, Captain Marvin Casey of the Bakersfield FD, was certain the fire had been intentionally set in a stack of flammable patio cushions. In January 1987, a number of suspicious fires broke out north of Pasadena in the city of Bakersfield. At a craft store, Marvin Casey discovered an incendiary device in a trash can of dried flowers. It was crude but effective. 3 matches bound to the middle of a cigarette by a rubber band concealed within a sleeve of yellow-lined paper. After lighting the cigarette, the offender would have ample time to distance himself before the cigarette burned down far enough to ignite the matches and start the fire. Later that same day, a second conflagration erupted in a trash can of pillows and foam rubber at Hancock Fabric Store in Bakersfield. The trail of arson continued in rapid succession, with one fire in Tulare followed by another in Fresno. With the exception of the Bakersfield craft store, Casey determined that every fire had begun in a pile of pillows. An audacious theory. This modus operandi did not escape Casey, who noted that the arson attacks had progressed sequentially from Los Angeles north along Highway 99 to Fresno, nor did the troubling realization that the fires had occurred immediately before and after an annual arson investigators conference in Fresno. Casey began to develop a controversial theory. The fires were set by one of the 300 arson investigators who had attended the Fresno Symposium. He obtained a list of the attendees, reducing the list of the suspects to the 55 who had traveled alone through Bakersfield on Highway 99. Unsurprisingly, when Casey shared his suspicions with his fellow arson investigators, he was either ignored or ostracized. Yet he persevered, convincing the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to conduct lab testing on the yellow paper recovered from the craft store. The ATF lab applied anhydrine, a chemical used to detect ammonia, to the paper on the off chance that it would react to amino acids from fingerprint residue. To the technician and Casey's surprise, a partial fingerprint appeared. Using a special photographic filter to deepen the contrast and reveal the ridge detail, the technician was able to render a usable print. It was entered into the automated fingerprint identification system, where it was compared to the fingerprints of criminals across the country. When the AFIS failed to produce a match, Casey asked the ATF to compare the print to the fingerprints of the 55 conference attendees on his list. His request was denied. For 2 years, the case sat in limbo. Then, in March 1989, a series of fires flared up again, this time along Highway 101, the road that led directly to Pacific Grove, the venue for the annual Arson Investigator Symposium. Reinvigorated, Casey compared the list of Pacific Grove Conference attendees to the previous one, narrowing the number of his suspects down to 10. Certain that the arsonist was among them, he convinced Fresno ATF agents to stealthily obtain the fingerprints of his 10 suspects and compare them to the partial print. To Casey's shock and disappointment, the results came back negative. Catching a break. Beginning in late 1990, a series of fires in Los Angeles prompted the development of the Pillow Pyro Task Force, deriving its name from the offender's MO. Like the earlier blazes, the fires had been set in retail outlets during business hours. In March 1981, the head of the task force, Tom Campuzano, distributed a leaflet containing information about this MO to the Fire Investigators Reaction Strike Team, an association of fire departments without an arson investigator as a permanent staff member. After reading the pamphlet, Scott Baker of the California State Fire Marshal's Office told Campuzano about Marvin Casey and his much maligned theory. At long last, Casey had found an influential arson investigator who was sympathetic to his cause. Campuzano and Casey met to discuss the force, and Casey handed over a copy of the partial fingerprint to the task force. They ran the print through a database of every person who had ever applied for a job with the LAPD, and this time they struck gold. The partial print matched the left-ring fingerprint of John Leonard Orr, one of the 10 names on Marvin Casey's list. Whether by sheer luck or professional incompetence, Orr had avoided being matched in 1989. Orr was a 41-year-old fire captain with many years of experience investigating arson. He was well-liked, charming, and had developed a legendary reputation for always being the first to arrive on the scene. As a result of Casey's findings, however, Orr was placed under surveillance with a monitoring device secretly attached to the bumper of his car. Orr found and removed it, only to have police fix another under his dashboard when he brought it in his vehicle for maintenance. When the set of the popular TV drama The Waltons was engulfed in flames in the afternoon of November 22, 1981, in Burbank, teletrack showed Orr driving home on the scene of the fire at 3:30 a.m. to receive the dispatcher's report. Tellingly, although the dispatcher incorrectly reported to the address of the fire, Orr still managed to arrive at the correct location. Although they lacked the necessary evidence to make an arrest, the task force realized that as long as Orr remained at large, human lives were at risk. They quickly applied for a warrant to search his home. In a briefcase, investigators found a cache of cigarettes, matches, and rubber bands, while his car yielded sheets of lined yellow paper. Even more damning was a video Orr had shot on March 14, 1990, of a hillside residence in Pasadena, followed by footage of the same house ablaze on October 2, 1992. Crucially, Orr had penned a manuscript for a novel entitled Bullets of Origin, in which the protagonist, Aaron Seidel, is an anagram of Acetyl arson. Lived the double life of an arson investigator and fire starter. Not only did Seidel employ the same incendiary device as the pillow pyro, he also set fires on his way to arson conferences and had burned down a hardware store, killing a little boy named Matthew. Frightening revelations. John Leonard Orr was arrested on December 4, 1991, and charged with 5 counts of arson, but his true day of judgment arrived on June 25, 1988, when the California State Court convicted him on 4 counts of first-degree murder related to the 1984 Old Inferno, for which he received a sentence of life in prison without parole. Orr's personal term was later attributed to psychopathy, because it was accompanied by other notably psychopathic traits, including manipulativeness, vanity, and lack of remorse. Although Orr still maintains his innocence after his arrest, the number of major fires in the area dropped from an annual average of 67 to 1. Given that Orr had been a secret serial arsonist, it is likely that he had a sixth sense for fires because he set them. This suspicion prompted Deputy District Attorney Michael J. Cabral to estimate that Orr set more than 2,000 fires over a 30-year period, making him one of the most prolific arsonists in United States history. In a final gruesome twist, Points of Origin features a scene in which Aaron Stiles sexually assaults and murders a young girl in a vehicle, which is then burned. Investigators claim to have identified the case, but lack of conclusive evidence of Orr's involvement. 2 additional fire-related deaths described in Points of Origin remain unaccounted for. If these horrific passages turn out to be true, Orr is not only an arsonist and mass murderer, but also a sexually motivated serial killer. Pyrophilia. While the vast majority of arsonists are insurance fraudsters or detention seekers, the pyromaniac is a unique breed fascinated by fire to the point of compulsively setting them. Even rarer than the pyromaniac is the pyrophile, Greek for fire lover. A person who is sexually aroused by the flames, the smell of smoke, the intense heat, and sometimes the roar of sirens racing to combat the inferno. Numerous entries in Orr's mostly autobiographical Points of Origin indicate that the lead character, Aaron Stiles, that is Orr himself, possessed this dangerous paraphilic disorder. Joseph Wambach, who worked as a detective sergeant in the Los Angeles Police Department for 20 years before he became a best-selling author, chronicled Orr's life in his book The Fire Lever. Wambach reported that the linking of fire and sex in Orr's manuscript is continuous and a key facet of Moore's motivation, a theory shared by investigator Marvin Casey.